I'm Ian Whitaker, and this is the ultimate collection of behind-the-scenes photos from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. In this next photo, you can see Kubrick with his 17-year-old daughter in his arms, Vivian, who he allowed to film a documentary on making The Shining. Here you can see Kubrick setting up a shot of the hedge maze in the lobby. The interior scenes of The Shining were filmed at Elstree Studios in Hertfordshire, England. That includes the interior of the Volkswagen Beetle seen here. It's not escaped many people that this carpet and the other one in the film are mazes too. Shelley Duvall, Jack Nicholson and other crew members celebrating on the set of The Shining. In a moment you'll see standing alongside the Volkswagen Beetle the second unit with the camera operator, Jeff Bly, Jeff's wife and their other camera assistant. The three doubled for the Torrance family in many of the unused shots of the car making its way to the hotel, and they're wearing costumes from the film, and you may have noticed they're all doing the Tony finger thing. In this video there are several Polaroid photos shot for continuity purposes. The next one is of actress Shelley Duvall in the caretaker's apartment bathroom. Steadicam inventor and operator Garrett Brown. Of course, a significant amount of film that made it to the final cut was taken on the Steadicam. I count 22 axes. I guess someone wanted to never have to tell Stanley Kubrick that they'd run out of axes. In 2019, one of the prop axes sold at auction in London for £172,200. That's about $224,000. In 2022, one that was definitely screen used, which had stage blood on it, went for $140,000. One of those Polaroid camera photos by continuity supervisor June Randall. In a moment we're going to see some photos from a deleted scene that was right at the end of the movie. It was the penultimate scene of the movie, or sequence of the movie. And there are several continuity photos that are obviously for that purpose. There are other photos in colour which is unclear what the origin is, and these have come to light at various times over the last decade or so. Now, the original script, which of course could have ended up being rewritten or modified by Kubrick, says that Ullman, carrying flowers, walks up to the reception, where a nurse and Danny are, playing snakes and ladders behind the desk. He walks to the open door of Wendy's room and there's a policeman sat outside on guard. Ullman enters and hands Wendy the flowers and invites her to stay at his house whilst reassuring her that, everything was a figment of her imagination. The red flowers do seem quite extravagant, and even the box and the ribbon does look red like roses, but I'm not sure if it is definitely roses. There are roses already just above her to the right, as you can see, which someone has already given her, maybe him. So the flowers and their presentation, in combination with the invitation, make it seem like there was a very, very happy ending, along with the typical horror movie hint of unresolved menace, to avoid being too sickly sweet, which is done by Ullman throwing Danny a tennis ball on the way out. Now, the tennis ball implies the same as almost every horror movie implies at the end, that it isn't over, the evil remains lurking or could come back at any time. It's there and open for sequels, obviously, as well. It's also implied by Jack being in the 4th of July photo in the final scene of the film, which was the next one after this hospital scene, before the credits started to roll. Kubrick's decision to move the stereotypically excessive, complete happy ending for the protagonist Danny and Wendy seems like it was a wise decision, notwithstanding any Kubrick fan would like to know about the scene and see it, because a lot of work has gone into it by him and other artists. So I don't think it's something that would benefit the film being restored, but hopefully one day someone will find a cut piece of film and it can be made available as supplementary material. And this isn't as far-fetched as it may sound, since a 17-minute extended version of 2001: A Space Odyssey was discovered. Evidence of how late the scene was removed, which was during the first phase of it being played at cinemas, can be seen in the two actors listed in the end credits, despite the fact they don't appear in the movie. Robin Pappers as nurse and Bernal Tucker in the role of policeman. If you notice the main entrance and the architecture above it in the centre of this photo and postcard of the Timberline Lodge, which is the location that the Overlook Hotel is based on, you'll be able to see that Kubrick removed the central entrance from the hotel, as you can see from these shots of the set built in England. In 2022, an axe used by Jack Nicholson in the movie was anonymously donated to the actual hotel, the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, after it hammered for $175,000 at an auction. Why was the Stanley Hotel the supposed location of this movie? In 1974, author Stephen King stayed at the hotel with his wife. King's night at the nearly empty hotel at the time inspired the setting for his best-selling novel, The Shining, which was published 3 years later in 1977. Emilio D'Alessandro as a young man here, with a model of the Overlook Hotel. He appears later in Eyes Wide Shut. He was born in Italy and moved to England, where he eventually crossed paths with Kubrick, and he was a cab driver. He had to transport the now well-known rocking phallic sculpture to the set of Clockwork Orange after some other work he did on Lolita. Kubrick asked him to become his personal driver, and that developed into assisting him in many other areas of his life. The rest is history. He stayed with Kubrick until his death in 1999, and then he wrote a memoir entitled S is for Stanley. You can see Danny Lloyd, who played Danny Torrance in The Shining, finding out what it feels like to be a Steadicam. Him and his family, when he was 5 years old, moved to London. That's him, his mother, his father and his brother, for what they were told would be a 17-week film shoot of The Shining, which turned out to last almost a year. To the left of this photo, and in many other photos, you can see a video monitor, and this was one of the first, if not the first film in which video monitors were used to see what had just been shot. Here you can see another example of how meticulously Kubrick planned and executed his films. In a moment you're going to see Jack looking at the Overlook Hotel scrapbook. Although it doesn't feature much in the novel by Stephen King, it doesn't appear in the final film. However, a fair amount of work was done to produce a scrapbook for the movie, and I believe cuttings were taken out of the old press and then the headlines were changed. These were cuttings of bad events, and the cuttings were changed so they included the Overlook Hotel mentioned in the headlines. There's at least 2 other colour photos of the scrapbook in this collection here. A number of scenes were shot with it, including Jack finding it mysteriously sitting on his writing table, and a later scene where he shows it to his wife, but all of these scenes were deleted from the final cut of the film. The continuity supervisor, June Randall, with Jack there in that iconic maroon jacket. And that jacket was sold in an auction for £73,200. That's roughly around $100,000. That auction was back in 2017. I believe that in every scene at the start of the movie, Jack is wearing something green. As things progress, he's wearing something red, this red maroon jacket. Obviously not the only red thing in the latter part of the movie. And another photo with June Randall here, Stanley Kubrick on the left, centre is his nephew, Manuel Harlan, and his daughter Vivian on the far right. Shelley said in an interview that she learned more from Kubrick filming The Shining than she had in all her previous pictures. The next photo is from the scene where Wendy brings Jack breakfast in bed. Kubrick's lighting assistant, Beth Butler, is seen here. This is a photo to test the lighting before filming. 17-year-old Vivian Kubrick, Stanley's daughter, seen here at the entrance to the bathroom in the caretaker's apartment. Kubrick standing in front of a charred set after a fire from a nearby soundstage spread to engulf the hotel lobby, Colorado lounge and the hallway. Kubrick having a word with Philip Stone, English actor who appeared in Clockwork Orange and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Leon Vitali here on the left, who helped coach Danny Lloyd for The Shining and who worked in many different capacities for Stanley Kubrick since they met in the mid-70s. He's credited on The Shining as being personal assistant to Kubrick. He's also worked for Kubrick as a casting director and as an actor. Overlook Hotel scrapbook, and to the left, Ray Lovejoy. He's the film editor for The Shining. On the right, Kubrick's personal assistant, Emilio D'Alessandro, who plays a newspaper vendor in Eyes Wide Shut. Shelley Duvall posing on set with rigger Tim Murphy and Chris Flanagan, a stagehand. Not the only bear we see in The Shining. There's a Winnie Pooh motif, I think, on Danny's shoes. There's a Winnie Pooh toy. There's the bear costume, and there's also a bear pelt on the floor. Is there any other bear in The Shining? Leave a comment below. And we've just passed a very interesting photo set in the hotel lobby, Dick Halloran's death scene, and you can see a special effects person there on their knees, ready to discharge fake blood from a bag up a tube and into the axe. This film frame with Jack and Danny was selected by Kubrick. It was one of several selected by him that were made available for press release, but it wasn't actually a frame that was used in the final cut of the movie. The black and white outdoor shot with Shelley and Danny that we just passed has trees and rocks in the background that are forced perspective miniatures. Kubrick's daughter Vivian there on the far right, smiling as an extra in the 1920s sequence in the Golden Room. This scene of Grady listening to Jack and freeing him from the pantry would have been at around 114 minutes into the film. It's uncertain if Grady remained silent or they conversed. It was probably cut to keep the scene more ambiguous. Polaroid lighting test image from Halloran's Florida bedroom. Continuity shot of the Adler Tipper S typewriter, or should I say one of the Adler Tipper S typewriters that Jack used. Because during the movie, the typewriter goes from a light tan colour to grey-blue. In these behind-scenes photos, you'll see Kubrick using, I think, the same model in yellow to modify the script of The Shining. A shot of the model of the Golden Room. A little bit later I'll talk about the models. And here you can see the helicopter, which was used to film the opening sequence to The Shining, and the kit that was used. Kubrick generously offered the unseen footage from this sequence to Ridley Scott, who used it for the end of Blade Runner. There's that yellow Adler Tipper S typewriter. This scene is actually listed in the Guinness Book of Records as the most retakes for a scene with dialogue. Detective Dick Halloran explains to a young Danny Torrance what The Shining means, but not many know that the iconic scene took at least 148 retakes before Kubrick was satisfied. Jack Nicholson's copy of The Shining screenplay, although from what I understand there were a lot of rewrites as it was being made, Kubrick on a typewriter, modifying, improving things, and Nicholson joked that he'd just given up on his own screenplay copy and he just took what sheets he was given each day as the latest. A copy of Stephen King's book The Shining, which belonged to Stanley Kubrick, filled with highlights and notes by the director. Another photo with forced perspective miniatures on the backlot of Borehamwood, this time with Garrett Brown. Steven Spielberg visited the set of The Shining in 1979. That's when he first met Stanley Kubrick at Elstree Studios in England. They met in the main living area where the grand fireplace was situated in the overlook. Spielberg has said since then that the set was exactly the way it was in the movie, all finished, yet Stanley Kubrick had a model of the set on a table where his typewriter was, and he was using a Nikon camera with an inverted periscope lens, actually taking still photographs with tiny stick figures and models. He was prospecting for shots. And he said to him without really thinking, and I quote Spielberg, "And you're looking for shots on a small 1/4 inch of the scale tabletop model?" And Stanley said, "Yeah, what's wrong with that?" Kubrick also used the method of models and the periscope in the production of Eyes Wide Shut. Far left, Leon Vitali unfortunately passed away on the 19th of August 2022. In 1974, when Kubrick was given a sneak peek as to what the Steadicam could achieve, Kubrick responded that it should revolutionise the way that films are shot. Kubrick designed many sets on The Shining, specifically for the capabilities of the Steadicam. They didn't all have flyaway walls or smooth floors, and the giant maze couldn't have been filmed as Kubrick intended by any other means. Now this bed, Jack and Wendy's bed in the Overlook Hotel bedroom, sold in 2014 for £7,200 British pounds, approximately $9,000 to $10,000 at the time. Once the production wrapped, a lot of the props were offered for sale at knockdown prices to the crew and the cast, at prices that you'd buy them for their utility, not as props to sell on, just so the production could recoup some money as fast as possible. Apparently at one point Kubrick had intended to film the twins in the maze, but in the end he changed his mind. Jack Nicholson helping Kubrick's daughter make some costume adjustments there in the Gold Room. Early during the production of The Shining, Danny Lloyd took a day off filming to attend the filming of The Muppet Show, which took place at ATV Elstree Studios nearby. John Alcott, director of photography next to Kubrick. Although the film was shot almost entirely at the studio at Elstree Studios in Hertfordshire, the maze was constructed at MGM Borehamwood Studios, also in Hertfordshire, England. The Timberline Lodge did not have a maze. Kubrick added a maze in front of the fictional version for The Shining. However, art imitates reality, and then reality imitates art. The Timberline Lodge has now planted a juniper bush maze for guests to enjoy. This is a custom docking bay to protect the Steadicam between shots. Leon Vitali with his back to us here. For those die-hard Shining fans, there's a 30-second 1980 TV spot for The Shining, which doesn't have deleted scenes, but it does have alternate takes of many scenes. It's on YouTube if you'd like to see it. I hope you've enjoyed seeing these photos with my commentary, and I invite you to join me again for my movie-length commentary of Eyes Wide Shut, also available on this channel, the IDP channel.